So good afternoon and welcome to the Gate of Hope. And today we're focusing on the fire element. So thank you for joining me today. And here we are transitioning from the wood element of spring into the fire element. And we're going to explore the different organs and the different associations that Oriental medicine assigns to the fire element. And as always, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. Today, we're going to also look at working with two particular points. And the first point is going to be the first point of the heart channel. And so I'd like to just take this moment to acknowledge that this is recorded. Acknowledge that we are on traditional land, and for that I like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of our land and our waters on which we work, sit, breathe, function, and also our lineage of Oriental medicine and the teachers that are part of our lineage. And so with my heart, I acknowledge all of that. And so we come to the heart. The heart is the primary organ of the fire element. And so we will be working with the heart today. So I have a beautiful affirmation and some working on some points that I'd like to look at. So welcome, whether you're watching online today or whether you're going to watch the recording afterwards. I'd like to also acknowledge that this recording will stay as part of the archives at the Australian Shiatsu College. So thank you. And I'm going to share the screen and just start with the affirmation. So I'll just come back to and so I'd really like us to think about our passion, and particularly our passion bringing us joy and an abundance of that joy, and helping to focus with our purpose. So if we start with our hands together at the heart center, focusing on our passion, and our passions bringing us joy, an abundance of that joy and purpose. And that fire, the energy of my fire element, supports me as I create the life I desire. So I do think that wholeheartedly, as I'll start with the 3 Om chant, invite you, if you'd like to also join me in your own time with the chant. And I'd like us to reflect on, once again, the affirmation, reflecting on our passions, reflecting on the energy of joy, of abundance and purpose. And as we explore the fire element, we're going to experience how that sits with us today. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, and I'll just ask if you sit quietly, finding a comfortable position, and you might like to have a cross-legged position. If we think about the position of the heart and small intestine meridians, they're most easily accessed by crossing our arms across our chest and crossing our legs. So I'll invite you to open the arms wide, experiencing that opening around the front of the chest, opening the hands and focusing right through the little finger as we activate the heart meridian. Breathing in and breathing out and crossing the arms across the chest and bowing down. Bowing in acknowledgement of our heart and small intestine. Today we'll be focusing on our heart over the next couple of months through the fire element. We'll also explore the small intestine's relationship and the accessory organs of pericardium and Sanjiao, also known as triple burner. Let's open up, breathing in, extending through the little finger again, and bringing your arms down by their side. We will do the alternate stretch of the other arm in front after we've sat and before we activate working with the specific points we're going to work with today. So I'd like to have this image of summer, Xia. And the word of summer, the character, is really an image of slowly walking under the fullness of the sun. And so we're really in this transition time. We're not in the height of summer yet. We can really feel the wind that's out there, that we can still transitioning from wood. And I've chosen Heart 1, and you'll see its name actually has within the character a relationship to wood as well. So we've got this beautiful relationship as we complete the cycle of spring and move into summer. And using the first point on the external heart channel, and I'm going to talk about the pathway of the heart channel, which is very beautiful to also image, but the first point, also the space where the energy comes out, it's the entry point of the heart channel. And so it's got this beautiful relationship from moving from the wood energy, expansion energy of spring, into the fire energy, further expansion of summer. And so just take this moment to have this beautiful story about the origin of the sun in East Asian medicine. At one time, the sun had 7 boys, 7 sons, each one, only one every day, only one of the suns would cross the heavens, bringing daylight and warmth to the earth. One day, for some reason, all of the suns decided to cross the sky together. Within minutes, the great emperor knew there was something wrong. He looked at the sky and saw the 7 suns burning the earth. He quickly found his great archer to shoot the suns. The great archer prepared his arrows and took out 7 arrows. He aimed straight and true and shot the first sun. Already the earth was beginning to blaze everywhere. He shot the second and then the third. Each arrow hit one of the suns straight in the heart, and they fell to earth as great black crows. He let the next 3 arrows fly quickly, one after the other. The emperor had taken away the last arrow, for he knew one sun had to remain or there would be no light. As the archer reached for the final arrow, he found his sack was empty and realized the last sun was needed for just the right amount of light. And it is true, we now are left in summer with this perfect amount of loving light. And so summer represents the fullness of warmth and the light of the sun. It's the most yang time of the year. The yang energy is at its fullest. In the peak of summer, the days are full of ease and flowers. And it's the image of the red phoenix, bringing gentle, warm breezes full of sweet, fragrant flowers. And so now I'm going to continue working with the screen as we start to look at the element of fire and its correspondences. And I'm going to invite you, as I always do, to reflect on these, and then I will have some input. You'll see that we'll also work through coming to the actual nature of, particularly focusing today on the first point on the heart channel. So remembering that we have this beautiful way of viewing the universe, the macrocosm, and therefore reflected in our body and our systems and at the micro level. And we have the circle representing the generating cycle, and the internal triangles representing the regulating or controlling cycles. So fire has this beautiful interrelationship with wood being its mother and earth being its child, but significant relationships with its grandparent in water, controlling or regulating fire, and fire regulating metal. And so it's always important with the notion of elements that we see them as ongoing representations of movement, of relationships, not static aspects. And so when we start to look at characteristics of fire element, naturally we'll see aspects in ourselves, as we did with water, and as we will as we move through the seasons, the elements of earth, metal and water. But in the Worsley system, which was an English Oriental medicine practitioner who formalized and created more defined structuring around the 5 element system to create structures of personality traits and symptomatology that he felt represented more concurrences with one particular element. And so from that came this notion that we have a dominant element. But within that dominance, as I mentioned, there is always the interrelationship of the other elements. And so it can be said that the person who is more a fire element, they will be at their best in the summertime. But a very out of balance fire element will also experience its extremes during this summer phase as well. So we keep that in mind as we move through these images of the elements. So let's look at some of the correspondence, and these came from the earliest classics. We know it's the season of summer, that it is about heat, that the direction is south because predominantly this was created in the northern hemisphere. The emotion is joy, the color is red, the taste is bitter, like a burnt bitter. The sound is laughing, and the sensation of taste is the bitter, and the organ sensation is the tongue and the heart blood vessels. The heart is what I want to focus on. It's seen as the supreme controller, and they considered the heart to be the emperor, to be the primary representation of heaven. And as such, the emperor had these traits which were like a chief executive, one of wisdom and fairness, of unselfishness, love for all, and an embodiment of truth. Perhaps not the qualities today we might think of in a chief executive, but the qualities that should be in there as the king, the heart, the emperor, the supreme controller. The power was dependent on these qualities, which then gained from the subjects love and devotion and respect. So ultimately, the controller, the heart, was responsible for order, leading in the way of the Tao, controlling, coordinating, delegating, arbitrating, prioritizing, reconciling differences, and assigning tasks. And people welcome that because of the love and the joy they receive from being aligned with the heart, which was aligned with the divine. And so therefore in that, the will was carried out with the help of all the 12 organs, which are seen as the assistants, the ministers, the officials, which worked in cohorts with the emperor. We know in a Western medicine framework, the heart's responsible for circulating blood throughout the body. So therefore, the heart's responsible for the blood vessels, for keeping the blood primarily inside those vessels. So therefore, nourishing all the internal organs. And so immediately we can start to see why blood and heart have such a close relationship. And as such, the heart organ allows for oxygen to flow to the muscles and organs, and for us as humans to feel warmth at a physical level, but also empathy and compassion. We talked in the wood element of the spirit of wood being the horn, sitting in the soul, and here the spirit of the heart is the Shen. And the Shen represents the outward expression of our individualization. And our Shen, which is reflected in the sparkle in our eyes, in the smooth amount of blood flowing through our skin. So all that's represented by as our Shen. And it emanates our capacity of compassion, gives us that sense of self, union with others, and therefore it helps us to feel empathy. The supreme controller or heart official, and as such, it allows us to connect to that divine source. As I mentioned, the ministers are the 12 organs. And we'll come back to this notion of love and this deep feeling of passion that we have in the heart. And we use this in our common language when we talk about feelings, heartfelt, heart of gold, and then also being heartbroken, heartless, wearing our heart on our sleeves. Warmth and laughter and enthusiasm. So just as the summer season, which is associated with the fire element, brings this blossoming and maturity, this flowering of the seeds planted in spring, well then love is this blossoming. It's the capacity of the human. And it's indeed who we are in full bloom. Nowhere is such love felt more deeply than in the heart, the current that connects us to each other as one, reaching the furthest corners of the body, mind, and spirit with each heartbeat. And we'll start to look at what happens when we go out of balance in the heart organ and how that then affects our capacity to give and receive orders, to set boundaries, to feel warmth, love, enthusiasm. And here we can start to see that panic and fear can set in. The spirit gets disturbed and rebellion can occur inside. So it's really interesting to see how these notions from these early classics about aspects relating to this fire element have been turned into different body types and flavors and tendencies. So we take some of this to, I think there is some liberalness in the way some of these notions have been used, but it's quite interesting to reflect on it. So if we look at the type of element body structure, then fire people have red constitution. Well, that sort of makes sense with the heat that goes with red. Perhaps a ruddy complexion, a bit more red around the cheeks, with a skinny face, full of muscles in the back and a small head. It's quite interesting. Stable step, sway their shoulders while they're walking. Energetic, believe in charisma. So charismatic is a big part of this energy of fire. Creative potential. You'll see these words keep repeating. Passionate, creative, sensation, sometimes drama, sentiment. Interestingly, perhaps more about relationships, transcendence than material wealth, as the earth element person might be. Interestingly, easily that can also move to having some at a deeper level lack of confidence and worries. And so therefore, very easily fire element, because of its nature of fire, moving very quickly, can go out of balance. Delicate hands and feet. Fun and exciting. But when they go out of balance, the fire type can experience anxiety, insomnia and palpitations, proning to overheat, suffering from skin rashes. Even though lungs rules the skin, the heat dominates and pushes into the skin. Again, looking at this aspect of passion and creativity, sometimes it can also then be impulsive and irritable. So you can see how very quickly the fire energy can burn themselves out. So this is different to the wood energy that has the mother of water providing that grounding. So if we come back to the image of the tree that needed a third of its base to be the roots down in the earth, which is that grounding, the fire energy has to have that relationship with water, which is its grandmother and its wisdom, but doesn't have that same grounding. Obviously, its mother is wood, so it makes use of that grounding of the tree, but very easily. And this is how you differentiate between a wood element and the fire element, is there'd be more of a tendency to go out of balance. And you'll see that in that second box. Fire person, naturally, they're warm, passionate, creative, charismatic, but they can very easily burn out. And if you also see one of the aspects there, burn you in the process if you get too close when they're out of balance. So we'll have a moment to talk about this in a minute, but I want to bring some of these other aspects up. And you might also think about what happens with drug use. Obviously in ancient Chinese time, they probably would have had some use of opium and other drugs. But if we think about drugs, party drugs that are used, you can see how very quickly they add fuel literally to the fire. We hear of side effects being people going into a cardiac arrest or psychosis, and it's because they're adding heat into the Shen, this fire element. So we'll keep that thought in mind. Repeating these, but I think it's really good to come back and remember these things again. So just some slight nuances. Again, pleasure, gratification can easily then be looking for stimulation. So wanting things to stay exciting. So fun-loving and romantic, but perhaps inability to sustain that, particularly if there's that deficiency in the water element. And needing to have people around, needing company all the time, not so great at being alone. You'll see some of the things in terms of supporting the fire element are like cultivating that aspect to meditate. And so you might find that the fire element person is more drawn to group practices, group meditations, rather than being on their own. And you can see that it's not a deficit. This is just our flavor, our tendency. So it's really great. That's the beautiful thing of these elements as a way of characterizing different tendencies, because we can start to say, wow, I thought, there was something wrong because I really do prefer company, but this might just be my flavor. And so therefore, to understand it, I have greater compassion for myself, and I can be gentle in saying, well, yes, I have this fire element, more dominant in fire element. I easily get excited, but I need to really watch myself that I don't burn out. So I cultivate, particularly the grandparent, the water element. So we'll look at that soon. Imagine a roaring fire. Really, that's what you've got. And so the heart, that's where the wood energy of fire and anger injures the heart if it's not properly channeled. And so this is where the grandmother really must come in, the water element, to provide that containment, constrainment into fire, but also by the water being the roots of the wood, providing that grounding so that the fire element doesn't get overwhelmed. Emotional being passionate and energetic and dramatic, volatile just becomes more the dominant way of moving. And so that's where, again, just working with these qualities of charisma, great leaders, people who've got the ability to fire up other people, but they might not be there to actually sustain the long haul of the work that needs to be done. So great people at starting, energetic, spontaneous. Fire is all about the present moment, and it can only be understood through the experience of feeling. So unlike water, which has a perspective on the past, it really has to be felt, the energy of fire. So it is like a magnetism. And so perhaps at this moment, before we go into any of the pathologies of fire, I'll just stop screen sharing and open it up. I'm sure you've got some thoughts already about the fire element. So who would like to share something from what we've talked about so far?
Hi, Marie, it's Aurora here.
Hi, Aurora.
It's terrific timing to have this session because I've been having some heart issues recently, and I'm going through the medical process to look at things, but I definitely feel there's a very strong emotional element to what I'm experiencing, and a drain, of my energy. So that all it all fits together, and that aspect of anger injuring the heart too. Like I feel like I'm much more impatient. I'm raising my voice a lot more, and that sort of thing. So it's really interesting to experience it. And I have been trying to do some more heart-based meditation to really try to get more connected with the heart energy. And of course, the aspect of meditation of being more grounded helps as well.
Thank you. And I think last time you also brought in, the notion of the loving kindness, meta practice. And so with the heart-based meditation, also reflecting on the role of water as the grandmother. So a hara-based meditation, focusing very much on grounding the energy, because heat rises. We've already got yang energy. So if you find that the energy of wood, the anger is rising up, then drawing it down into the hara, bringing it into that dantian, which is the moving space between the kidneys, which is the water element, which is the grandmother. Rooting the fire. Remember the relationship of fire and water? So the water comes up to meet the fire, and the fire goes down to meet the water. You've got this beautiful relationship, and that's what the sanjal, the three burners, the relationship which we'll look at when we, in a couple of months, look at Sanjiao. It gives us that relationship. That's what the source points are, all the source points coming back into that moving space between the kidneys of all the organs. Would anyone else like to reflect?
I have a question as well as a reflection.
Yes, Anastasia.
You said something about fire needing to be felt like energetically in the present moment as opposed to water having a perspective on the past, and I just didn't really understand that.
Well, we think of any chronic conditions. So water is our jing. We think of the water element, the kidneys are storing our heritage. And so in that way, it has a relationship to our past. It is our biological story. And in that way, its relationship to fire is the spark, very ethereal, and water is much more matter in terms of yin and yang. Water, the most yin, fire, the most yang. So that's the relationship of wisdom, that there is that notion within, a long story of holding in the jing is our wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was also just thinking about my relationship to people who I think have a lot of fire, because I often envy them because they just connect so well with their environment, and they're able to sort of get carried away and feel a lot of things, a lot of joy, and yeah. So and one more thing. I was thinking about a fire person who had a very angry parent and how that might affect them as opposed to another dominant element.
Yes. And particularly as you've expressed, the notion of fire to relate. So, the word's often transformation, very much about relationships. And so if every time that person was met with anger, which is, and by energetically, and the wood we saw last time, that anger is the energy expression of wood element. So it is the movement of energy. Then it may be that it forces the person will see into a yin type obstruction in fire, which we're about to look at, yang and yin types. So you might reflect on that answer in that point. Thank you. Did anyone else have anything to reflect? We'll continue on. There'll be some more time for reflection. I'll continue. Okay. All right. Sorry, it's got to open the wrong. Okay. So, okay, so let's look at what happens when it goes out of balance. And here again, you've seen this notion about water needing that to contain the energy if it gets out of balance. Let's start to see if we can break up the energy of fire into a yang and yin type. So we start to see naturally that yang can be more extremely unpredictable. And what's quite interesting here is that we can also start to define mental illness states in these categories. So most manic depressive episodes are considered fire yang. And so here, one moment, the life of the party filled with joy and excitement, and the next moment, deep despair, whilst dragging everyone around them down with their extreme nature. And so the yang fire person's artistic, passionate, magnetic, maybe even hypnotic. The life of the party, wanting to have a strong cause that they can really hang on to, but also can become addicted to coffee and alcohol. And on the other side of that, can be prone to issues to do with the heart. So particularly naturally things that are yang in nature. Irregular heartbeats like palpitations, tachycardia is a rapid heartbeat, higher blood pressure, heart pain, which is the angina, affecting the sleep, because basically the blood holds the spirit and it needs to have a restful state for us to sleep at night. So too much heat agitates the spirit and therefore affecting the sleep, and also the intestines because of its relationship with the small intestine. And when we look at the pathway, we'll see the internal pathway travels from the heart deeply into the small intestine. And so excess heat is transferred into the small intestine. Whereas a yin person, fire person, can have a much different expression, more introverted, unlike that over-extroverted yang fire. And this can develop as a result of childhood trauma, causing the fire element person to feel defeated, to develop a negative and pessimistic outlook on life. And the person may strive towards these life aspirations, and it will require years and years of ongoing commitment to work. And you might see this, someone who's worked really, really hard on themselves to overcome these. And this may, on a physical level, once again, similarly to the yang style, but the symptoms would be different. The pulses would show more of a deficiency, a weakness, rather than in the excess. Both would probably have heat because it's the fire element, but in the heart position, the pulse would represent a more deficient state, a Kyo state. And this might affect, again, the mind, restlessness, emotional fragility, with other aspects that could affect the heart around the valves, around inflammation of the heart, around, as it says, aneurysms, which is a bulging of the heart blood vessel. So you can start to see that both the yang and the yin personality types can affect the physical structure of the heart. So, we'll go through this again, this notion of needing to have expression. That's probably passion and expression, the key. Obviously, joy is the emotion. These are the key aspects, and we'll continue on over the next few sessions to go into the accessory organs of pericardium, also known as the protector of the heart. Triple burner, obviously relating to the 3 zones, also known as triple warmer, or san, which means 3 jiao, 3 areas, and how this then transforms and moves the heat from the heart down into the small intestine and through all the different aspects of the body. So heat is the climate associated. So therefore, you'll find that people who are more fire element tend to get hotter and find extreme overheating in summer, so that they don't necessarily like the warm weather. Because of the heart aspects, they really need to observe their consumption of alcohol and foods, fatty foods, all of those things, because of the aspects. So really important to not overdo the exercise and look at stress management. So other things, look, we know about allowing, because the fire person is very much about relationships. Journaling is a fantastic means of having a method of expression. So journaling would be something that I would focus a lot with my fire element clients, and particularly the regularity, regular small meals. So not overdoing things and having planning. So using that energy of wood, which is about the planner. Remember, it was the general of the army. so that the energy of fire, which is easily consumed, can be contained. So it's really about using your other elements to make the most of this beautiful element of fire over consumption of spicy food. So here, as warm as we'd get in terms of food preparation would be using more steaming methods, sauteing, trying to avoid those drying out methods like baking. And you'll find that older people tend to use a lot of baking. It's something traditionally that they did, and that baking dries the food out. It heats the food up and then dries what's already a drier constitution. And naturally spices, so chili needs to be minimized, and just staying with warm spices like cardamom and ginger, and including bitter foods. So bitter is very good for the heart. So obviously the color is red, so things like beetroot particularly, but leafy greens, as they're going to come from that wood element. Cooling foods, pears, cucumber, mochi. Mochi is a sweet pounded rice, particularly good for the blood and the heart. So now is the excitement of coming to this beautiful point, Heart 1, and I thought this was so appropriate. And I just want to take you on a little pathway journey of the heart organ, of the heart meridian. So mainly we hear about the external pathways, but what's just as important is the internal pathways, and often the internal pathways give us clues to what we might not have associated with the organ. So if we think about our heart sitting in our chest, just slightly left to the lateral side of the thoracic cavity, then initially the main branch descends down through the diaphragm and descends into the small intestine. So that's why immediately we've got this relationship from the heart into the small intestine and circulates around the small intestine. Another branch, the ascending branch, comes up through the esophagus and into the eyes. Now, I thought this was amazing. And if we looked at last time's relationship wood, and particularly the gallbladder comes into the eyes at the lateral side. Well, here, the heart meridian has an internal pathway to our eyes. So tears, emotions, and most importantly, the Shen. So one way of diagnosing our clients, their spirit, is through their eyes. So this is why the Shen manifests in the eyes. And this is why we can see the sparkle in someone's eyes is the closest manifestation to their Shen. And that's because of this beautiful internal pathway running, I've said, the ascending branch running alongside the esophagus, connecting with the eye system. This is beautiful. And then the direct branch running upwards into the lungs and then straight out Heart 1 at the axilla. And I'll just give you, I'll come back to I just want to show you swinging down from the axilla down to the little finger. We've got this beautiful 9 points on the heart channel. And today we're going to focus with Heart 1. So let's come back to Heart 1. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story around it. And already the name. So Qigong has this same notion around this inner spring. So it's pronounced Qi-Juan, and it has several meanings. Utmost source, summit spring, and the source reaching all limits. So let me just read a little bit of a story around it to you. So Qi-Juan, Heart 1. It's the entry point of the heart meridian, and it means a source that can reach all limits. And you might like to hold that point, both sides or one side, while I'm reading it and just having this reflection. Now, I'll just go back again. I want you to see the characters. So there's 2 characters, and in fact, the second character normally sits underneath the first. So as I'm reading this, I want you to visualize the character on the screen in two parts. The first one superior and the second one aside it inferior. And so what's really nice is to image then this first word, the first one is the chi, G. And it's drawn as a person extending themselves between heaven and earth. And here we've got two aspects to this first word chi. And the first aspect comes from vision and hope. And that relates to the wood element. So you can see we've got this relationship from spring, and even you can see higher spring. Now we've got spring meaning water, but we've also got this nature from wood. So wood is actually part of that first character. So we're moving, transitioning from spring into summer, and this point is most appropriate for that because it has the nature of wood in it. But it's really about extreme limits, the highest point, and to reaching an end. And I really reflected as I meditated on this point, how we're coming to the end of the year, this extraordinary year. So this point could also be a culmination, as it's a source reaching all limits of our completion of 2020. And it also has this other part, which is the second part of the character, which is normally read as underneath. And it has the image of pure, clear spring water gushing upwards. And we've got this relationship now of the water element, and why this point gives us this relationship of the grandmother of water and how we need the water to keep the fire grounded. And in the imaging, it's from this inner source that we can move forward and extend our limits, which is what that fire element gives us. From this depth of vitality, we can grow by using the understanding and wisdom we find deep within to reach the heavens and extend our roots on earth. We can reconnect with the wholeness of who we are in the well springs of our heart, and we can find balance, harmony, and joy to do that. This point, Chi-Chuan, or Heart One, is our very fine spiritual connection to the life within us that is part of the wholeness and greatness of spirit, of Shen. To touch this source of love and joy reunites us with the warmth that flows through all life. And so when we feel lost or isolated or have despair or anxiety, then we go to this point. It reconnects us to our inner source of wisdom, and it allows us to come back to our love, enabling us to really light up and feel life surge inside us. And so I'd like to present some options of affirmations that relate to this point so that we can finish with that. And obviously on a practical level, where it is, it helps with the shoulder. You can look all those things up. But I think it's really nice to think about what you want to take. So I've given you a number of different affirmations today, and I'd like you to choose one for yourself. And it might be about your heart being open and feeling fearless with that. Feeling unashamed. We talked about shame a lot last time. Feeling strength. Having an ability to protect yourself and others. Feeling the force. Feeling personal power. Feeling passion and connecting with the raw creative energy. So I'd like you to take one of those. If you've got pen and paper, write it down. And then we're going to collectively hold Heart One. I'm going to ask that you rock forward and back, and if you can, remember your affirmation, or if you want to look at the screen, and holding that in your mind, repeating it quietly to yourself as you rock forward and back 7 times. And I'll just allow you to be in that space for a few moments. And quietly bringing your awareness back into the space. I'm going to stop the screen sharing and I'm going to ask you to share with me now. So I'm interested in your reflections on all that we've looked at today and talked about. And as I certainly relate to a lot of those aspects of fire, I need your feedback. So I'd love to have some interaction, please.
I'd just like to say thank you very, very much. As always, Marie, your lessons are always very timely and very relevant in my life. I am at the moment, when you brought up this topic, I thought, oh wow, this is great, because I'm trying to connect more and more to my joy. And yeah, it's just a beautiful little meditation just to sit on heart one and have a little affirmation, and also know that, you know, we have to also work on wood and water to help cultivate that joy in our life. Like, I have moments of joy when I go for a walk, and I'm trying to work with and integrate more joy in my life. And you just, I think you hit the nail on the head for me this week by giving me this little meditation practice. So just to help me, be more connected with heart one being the source of reaching all limits. It's beautiful. It's just perfect. Thank you.
That's your Christmas gift.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Just trying to turn my speaker up. I'm sorry, I realised that wasn't on full. I hope you've all been able to see me or hear me properly. Anyway, it doesn't want to do what it wants. Anyone else want to give me some feedback?
I can share some more reflections.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've really been noticing lately that if I'm in a little bit more of a balanced place, how much more open I am, like in terms of connection and my ability to feel connected to people, like walking into a room and having the desire to be open to all the different energies, as opposed to when I'm not so balanced and walking to a room and feeling like I need to like preserve my energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really liked my heart is fearlessly open.
Yes, wonderful.
And I also noticed that whenever my heart meridian gets worked on, I feel joy.
Great, great. Well, it'd be lovely for you to work your heart meridian too, you know. Great, thank you.
Marie, I'm on Alina's computer, so I'm
I saw that. Yes, Andrea, I've got your name there as Alina. Yes.
Oh, good. Because I thought it might be a bit confusing. And I've got the screen in front of me, but the computer's on the side. So that's why my head is like a bit skewed.
No,
so
I figured that. Yep.
I'll look at the computer.
Yep.
Although I'm not looking at you, so it seems strange talking.
It's okay. I can cope with you not looking at me.
Okay, I'll look at you then.
Yep.
I mean, as you're aware of my situation, yes, for me, heart stuff is, for years has been a big thing, and that, certainly that I feel, sort of great compassion and, sort of very heartfelt, but at the same time, like for myself, I notice a lot of the, if you say more the pathology issues, with the heart as well. So I found it very interesting with you talking about perhaps more connecting with the water element and of course the wood element. I mean, that's like, in a way, the wood element is scary, like that anger is scary, because that sort of, to me, is like the opposite to how I would imagine that the heart energy is. So yes, where I think it was Anastasia was saying about having the heart open fearlessly, I think would be, would be quite an amazing thing. Because yes, so what I'm looking at too then is connecting with that water energy, because I mean, I certainly feel, again for myself, is that there's certainly a I'm going to say like a weakness there as well. So, with the water element, perhaps not then connecting or supporting or cooling down the fire heat. For me, like summertime is a challenging time, that there is so much environmental heat. And, I certainly learned, many years back that baked foods doesn't work very well when that fire element is sort of out of balance. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you.
Marie, is there a difference?
Yep.
Sorry, Marie, it's Aurora here. Just with the heat of summertime,
yep.
What's the difference between dry heat and humid heat for people with fire imbalance? Any thoughts?
Well, I guess, it depends on what other patterns are happening as we relate dryness to the lungs and moisture, dampness to the spleen. Obviously, the control of fire is meant to control metal, and it is the mother of earth. So both would be a problem depending on the person's other interrelationships. So yeah, there's not really a clear answer where dryness is worse than dampness. It really, because of that, both the child and then the grandchild, both would have a relationship depending on their pathology.
Yes, because I was just thinking about, if you're a practitioner in a humid environment versus a drier environment, you might see, more of certain things in your clinic or in your
okay. So if you worked if you were in Queensland for instance, well, and we know, there's a saying, isn't it? In the tropics, they go tropo, that the heat and the damp, because we know that, well, in one of the heart pathologies, so I only talked about yang and yin, I didn't talk about, as you're talking about, damp. So we know that, as you learn in second year, that the pathology of damp phlegm heat, obstructing the heart. So therefore, phlegm is always considered the most recalcitrant of all pathogens. It's much easier to remove heat. We can drain heat, we can shift heat. Damp is the hardest of all pathogens to move. And heat dries damp into phlegm. And then things get really bad when they have phlegm because it dries everything up. So probably well, see, then you've got the dryness that can turn the damp into phlegm. So you've got both there.
I mean, I'm not in a humid, hot environment. I'm in Victoria, so
no, I know, but to put them, yes,
you know, it would
yes.
be interesting working in certain, you know, down here. You know, well, I'm in Warrnambool, so wind is, you know,
Yes,
a big
wind is windy Warrnambool. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, just interesting.
Yes, thank you, and lovely to see you, Janine.
Hi, Marie. I just wanted to share what came up for me.
Have you got any reflections?
Yeah, in the meditation, it made me think of my niece who's 8, and I know she has a heart constitution. Regardless of how tired she is, she'll wake up and I'll hear her singing, like she's really delightful. And she's been making me, during lockdown, she's been sending me these beautiful handmade cards, and this is just one of them. And so I've been making cards to send her back. So she's been bringing out my creative side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we need to relate. That was one of the hardest things of lockdown. And maybe what we actually experience most of lockdown is that we are beings that need relationship. We're relational beings. So our heart was affected in lockdown. And so, you know, this beautiful point allows this completion of that cycle. So now we go to this utmost spring, this capacity, as we can come together, reuniting and having these beautiful expressions of connection that you're sharing with us. Pure. And in a young person, it's so pure, isn't it? It's not affected by all the years of relationships and possibly rejection. So she's expressing, you know, she is that utmost joy of the spring bubbling up, isn't she?
She's truly delightful.
Lovely. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. So would anyone else like to share? Otherwise we will finish. Once again, just acknowledging you know, that we do come together, that our spirit is led to work for our great, you know, for our inner purpose, but also with the guiding purpose to serve, you know, that comes from the heart. So with that, I just acknowledge everybody here, and as I did when I started, acknowledging the land, the traditional owners, custodians, and that we learn something of that we are custodians of this beautiful spirit with us, so that we also look after our land, our body, our vessel, with that same reverence. And so with that, I just acknowledge everybody here and wish you all a heartfelt summer, and look forward to connecting, continuing the journey, looking at small intestine, pericardium and Sanja as we continue on. So au revoir.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Marie.
Lovely to see you all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marie.
Bye. Oh, all good, Jason. I'll just stop recording.